Echoes of desperation. The Kari system burned. Commander Lyra Venn stood before the observation window of Outpost Sentinel-9, watching distant explosions bloom like dying stars across the black void. Each flash of light meant another ship destroyed, another crew lost, another piece of the Orion coalition torn away by the relentless advance of the Vrakul Dominion. She was Selkari, a species known across the galaxy for their tactical brilliance and ice-cold composure under pressure. Her silver-scaled skin reflected the emergency red lights that pulsed throughout the command center. Her four-fingered hands gripped the edge of the console so tightly that her claws left marks in the metal. Behind her, the command center buzzed with desperate activity. Officers from a dozen different species worked at their stations, coordinating the final defense of a system that everyone knew was already lost. The air smelled of burning circuits and recycled oxygen pushed to its limits. "Commander, the fourth defensive line has collapsed," reported Lieutenant Kess, a young Thalan with blue crystalline features that normally sparkled with inner light. Now those crystals looked dim and cracked from exhaustion. "The Vrakul are advancing on the inner colonies. Estimated time until they reach our position, 14 hours. 14 hours. Less than a day before the outpost fell." Lyra turned from the window and surveyed her crew. 37 beings from 17 different coalition worlds, all of them volunteers who had stayed when evacuation shuttles departed 3 weeks ago. They had families, homes, futures waiting for them. Instead, they chose to remain here, buying time for refugee convoys to escape deeper into coalition space. "Status of the evacuation fleets?" Lyra asked. "The last civilian transport cleared the system boundary 40 minutes ago," answered Kess, consulting his datapad. "They should reach the Antares gate within 6 hours. After that, they'll be safe behind the inner defensive perimeter." Safe. The word felt hollow. The Vrakul Dominion had been carving through coalition space for 8 months, and every defensive perimeter had eventually fallen. The inner territories were buying time, nothing more. The Vrakul were unlike any enemy the galaxy had faced in recorded history. They did not simply conquer worlds, they consumed them. Every planet they captured became a slave world, its entire population fitted with neural control implants and transformed into mindless servants of the Dominion. Vrakul warlords took savage pride in displaying their slave armies, forcing captured species to fight against their own kind. Those who resisted were made examples of. Entire cities reduced to glass. Populations spaced into the void while their families watched through hijacked communication channels. The Vrakul believed that terror was the most efficient weapon, and they wielded it with horrifying precision. "They're hailing us again," said Officer Torvin, a hulking Krent whose thick gray hide bore scars from a dozen battles. His deep voice carried across the command center. "Fourth time this hour." "Ignore it," Lyra said flatly. She knew what the message contained, the same demand they had sent repeatedly. Surrender and accept the mercy of servitude, or be destroyed and transformed into components for Vrakul biofactories. There was no mercy in servitude. Death was preferable. "Commander," called out a voice from the archive station. Lyra turned to see Specialist Nira, a Quellan researcher with moth-like antennae and compound eyes that never seemed to stop processing information. "I may have found something. It's unlikely. Extremely unlikely. But given our situation—" "Speak plainly, Nira," Lyra said, walking over to the specialist's workstation. Nira's delicate fingers danced across holographic displays, pulling up ancient files from the outpost's historical database. "I've been searching through every old emergency protocol in our archives, looking for anything that might help. Most of it is standard coalition procedure from decades past, but I found this." She highlighted a file marked with a date from 473 years ago. The classification tag read, "Auxiliary Emergency Contact, Deprecated, Historical Use Only." "What am I looking at?" Lyra asked. "A distress protocol," Nira explained, her antennae twitching with nervous energy. "From before the Coalition was even called the Coalition. Back when it was just 5 founding species trying to establish mutual defense pacts. This file contains coordinates and communication frequencies for an auxiliary ally, a species that helped defend against the Zarathan swarms in the old wars." Lyra felt her breathing slow. "Which species?" Nira's compound eyes met her gaze. "Humanity, Commander. The Terrans." Silence fell across the command center like a physical weight. Every officer within earshot had stopped working and turned to stare. Lieutenant Kess spoke first, his voice careful. "Commander, with respect, humans are extinct. They've been gone for over 4 centuries. The historical records are clear. Humanity withdrew from the galaxy after the Silence War and was never heard from again. Every expedition sent to their home system found nothing but abandoned stations and derelict worlds. I know the history, Lieutenant, Lyra said quietly. She looked back at Nira. Why would this protocol still be in our database if humanity is gone? Because it was never officially removed, Nira answered. The Coalition founders believed that if humanity ever returned, they should still be able to contact us. The files were maintained as historical records, nothing more. But Commander, the coordinates are here. The emergency frequency is here. If there's even a chance. There's no chance, interrupted Officer Torvin. His massive frame seemed to fill the space as he approached. I respect the desperation, Commander, but we'd be signaling ghosts. Humans are legends now. Stories we tell cadets about the mysterious allies who vanished into the dark. Lyra understood his skepticism. She had grown up hearing those same stories. Humanity was mythologized across the Coalition, a species that appeared during the galaxy's darkest hour, fought alongside the younger races with terrifying efficiency, and then simply left. No explanation. No farewell. Just empty star systems and unanswered questions. Some believed humans had destroyed themselves in civil war. Others thought they had transcended physical existence or fled to another galaxy. The most cynical voices suggested humanity had never been real at all, just propaganda invented by the Coalition founders to inspire courage during desperate times. But Lyra had read the unclassified reports. She had seen the weapon signatures in ancient battle logs, the technological specifications that Coalition scientists still could not fully replicate, the testimonies from survivors who fought alongside human soldiers. Humanity had been real. Of that she was certain. Whether they still existed was another question entirely. How long would it take to send the signal? Lyra asked. Nira consulted her displays. The coordinates are in the galactic northwest, approximately 800 light-years from our position. Using our quantum-entangled communication array, the message would arrive instantaneously. But Commander, we have no way of knowing if anyone is there to receive it. And if they are there? Lyra pressed. How long would it take them to respond? That depends entirely on their technology, Nira admitted. Coalition vessels would require weeks to cross that distance even with our fastest slipspace drives. But the old records suggest human drives were significantly more advanced. In theory, if they still exist and if they still possess their old technology, perhaps 3 to 4 days. 4 days. The outpost had 14 hours. Lyra turned to face her assembled crew. Every eye was on her, waiting for the decision that would define their final hours. She could see the mixture of hope and doubt in their expressions. They trusted her judgment, but they also understood the mathematics of their situation. Opinions? Lyra asked, opening the floor. Lieutenant Kess spoke first. Even if humans still exist, we have no reason to believe they would help us. They abandoned the galaxy once already. Why would they return for strangers? Because that's what they did before, countered Nira. Every historical account describes humans as fiercely protective of other species. They called themselves guardians of the weak and protectors of the innocent. If even a fraction of those accounts are true, accounts written by species desperate for heroes, Torvin interrupted. We're assigning nobility to ghosts based on stories told by our grandparents' grandparents. This is wishful thinking. Then what do you suggest? Lyra asked him directly. The big Krenth was silent for a long moment. Finally he growled, I suggest we die with weapons in hand, taking as many of those Vrockhole monsters with us as possible. At least that's honest. Lyra understood his perspective. She felt the same instinct, to go down fighting, to make the enemy pay for every meter of the outpost in blood and fire. It was what warriors did. But she was also a commander, and commanders had to think beyond the immediate battle. Officer Nira, Lyra said, her decision crystallizing. Prepare the emergency signal. Use the exact protocol from the archive. If humans are out there, we'll give them one chance to prove the legends were true. Commander, Kess began. I know it's unlikely, Lyra cut him off. I know it's desperate, but we're already dead, Lieutenant. The Vrockhole will overrun this station whether we call for help or not. Sending the signal costs us nothing except a few minutes of power. And if there's even the smallest chance that humanity still exists and still cares about the galaxy they left behind. She let the sentence hang in the air. Torvin shook his massive head but said nothing more. Kess returned to his station, doubt clear on his crystalline features. But Nira immediately began working, her fingers flying across the controls as she accessed the ancient communication protocols. I'll need approval codes from you, Commander, Nira said. The emergency frequency is locked behind old security measures. Lyra stepped up to the console and placed her hand on the biometric scanner. The system chimed, recognizing her authority as station commander. Ancient code flickered across the screens, programming language that predated modern coalition standard by centuries. Signal ready, Nira announced. What should I include in the message? Lyra considered the question carefully. What do you say to ghosts? What do you say to legends? What do you say to a species that abandoned the galaxy 400 years ago? Keep it simple, Lyra said finally. Broadcast our coordinates, our situation, and this message. To humanity, if you still exist, if you still remember your old allies, we are dying. The galaxy you left behind is being consumed by an enemy that enslaves entire species. We do not ask for salvation. We only ask that you know we stood for the same principles you once taught us. Freedom, dignity, and the right of all beings to live without chains. If you can hear this, know that we remembered you. Outpost Sentinel-9 Orion Coalition, signing off. Nira typed rapidly, encoding the message. Signal prepared, Commander. Ready to transmit on your order. Lyra took a deep breath. This was either the most desperate act of hope she had ever committed, or the most foolish. Perhaps both. But they had tried everything else. Every conventional strategy, every tactical doctrine, every weapon in the coalition arsenal. Nothing had stopped the Vrokul advance. Maybe it was time to try something unconventional. Something desperate. Something that reached back across the centuries to a species that might not even exist anymore. Send it, Lyra commanded. Nira pressed the activation key. The communication array came to life with a sound like distant thunder. Quantum-entangled particles aligned across impossible distances, carrying the message instantaneously to coordinates 800 light-years away. The signal burned through the void, a desperate prayer thrown into the darkness. For 3 seconds, the entire command center held its breath, as if expecting an immediate answer. But the void remained silent. The stars burned cold and indifferent. The explosions continued in the distance as coalition ships died fighting impossible odds. Nothing changed. Signal sent successfully, Nira reported quietly. It will repeat on the emergency frequency every 6 hours until our power grid fails. Thank you, Specialist, Lyra said. She turned back to the observation window, watching the Vrokul fleet formations growing larger as they advanced through the system. Their ships moved like predators, dark and angular, designed to inspire terror. All stations, battle readiness, Lyra commanded, her voice carrying across the command center. The Vrokul will be here in less than 14 hours. We're going to make them regret every second of it. I want all defensive batteries charged, all fighter wings prepped, and every mine in our inventory deployed in defensive shell pattern Delta 7. If we're going to die, we die making them pay. Yes, Commander, the crew responded in unison, their voices strong despite the circumstances. As her officers returned to their stations with renewed purpose, Lyra allowed herself one final glance at the communication console where Nira had sent the message. The display showed the signal repeating endlessly, broadcasting into the dark where humanity might, just might, still listen. Lieutenant Kess appeared at her side, his expression troubled. Do you really believe they'll come, Commander? Lyra was silent for a moment, considering the question honestly. No, she admitted quietly. But I believe in the chance. And sometimes, Lieutenant, the chance is all we need to keep fighting. Kess nodded slowly and returned to his station. The Kari system burned, and Outpost Sentinel-9 prepared for its final battle. The signal continued broadcasting into the void, a message sent to legends, to ghosts, to a species that had vanished into mystery centuries ago. In the command center, nobody truly believed anyone would answer. They were wrong. 800 light-years away, in a region of space the Coalition had long ago marked as dead and empty, something stirred. Sensors came online. Ancient protocols activated. And in the darkness between stars, a massive ship began to move. The humans had heard the call. And they were coming. The Resolute arrives. 3 days. That was how long Outpost Sentinel-9 survived beyond all projections. 3 days of continuous combat that defied every tactical model and exceeded every expectation of what desperate defenders could achieve. The first day had been the worst. The Vrokul fleet arrived exactly when predicted, a massive force of 200 warships commanded by Warlord Krasith, one of the Dominion's most decorated butchers. His flagship, the Eternal Suffering, was a monstrosity of biomechanical engineering, a living ship grown from captured species and augmented with weapons designed to inflict maximum psychological trauma. The battle began at dawn, station time. Vrakul assault cruisers hammered the outpost shields with plasma bombardment while fighter swarms probed for weaknesses. Commander Lyra Ven coordinated the defense with mechanical precision, rotating shield frequencies, deploying countermeasures, and using every trick accumulated across decades of military service. They held. Against all odds they held. The first wave broke against the station's defensive batteries. The second wave fared no better. Lyra's tactical brilliance combined with her crew's desperate courage created a defense that should have been impossible. Vrakul casualties mounted, 3 cruisers destroyed, 7 damaged, countless fighters reduced to debris. But the defenders paid a terrible price. Outpost Sentinel-9's shield generators were operating at 20% capacity. Life support was failing in 3 sections. 70% of their defensive batteries were offline. And their crew, which had started at 37, was now down to 22. Lieutenant Kess had died in the first assault, killed when a Vrakul boarding party breached Section 7. He fought them hand-to-hand with a plasma cutter, buying time for his team to seal the bulkheads. They found his body surrounded by 8 dead Vrakul soldiers. Officer Torvin lost his left arm to an explosion but refused medical treatment until the current wave was repelled. He continued operating the weapons console one-handed, his gray blood dripping onto the controls while he cursed the Vrakul in 6 different languages. Specialist Nero worked without sleep, rerouting power, patching systems, and keeping the outpost functional through technical genius and pure stubborn will. Her moth-like antennae drooped with exhaustion, but her compound eyes remained focused. And through it all, Lyra stood at the command center, making impossible decisions with impossible calm. Sacrifice shield strength to power weapons. Vent atmosphere from compromised sections to deny the enemy cover. Send the last fighter wing on a suicide run to take out a Vrakul carrier. Every choice cost lives. Every choice bought time. The second day brought a brief respite. Warlord Krozith pulled his fleet back to regroup, clearly shocked that such a small outpost had inflicted such damage. Vrakul tactics relied on overwhelming force and psychological intimidation. They were not accustomed to prey that fought back with such ferocity. During the lull, Lyra walked through the damaged sections of the outpost, checking on her remaining crew. They were exhausted, wounded, and terrified, but their spirits held. She found one young Quellan engineer crying over the body of her partner, killed when a fuel line ruptured. Lyra sat with her for 10 minutes, saying nothing, just being present. Sometimes command meant sharing the grief, not offering false comfort. "Why are we still fighting?" the engineer finally asked, her voice broken. "Everyone knows we're going to die here. The evacuation fleets are already safe. We've done our duty. Why not? Why not just end it quickly?" Lyra had asked herself the same question 100 times. She looked at the engineer with tired eyes and said, "Because surrender means slavery. Because every hour we survive is an hour the Vrakul aren't attacking someone else. And because..." She paused, then continued more quietly, "Because I sent a message 3 days ago, and until I know it went unanswered, I'm going to keep hoping someone heard it." The engineer nodded, wiped her eyes and returned to her post. That night, as Lyra tried to sleep in her quarters, she dreamed of ships emerging from the darkness. Massive vessels with strange designs, weapons that tore through Vrakul fleets like they were paper, and a voice on the comm saying, "We heard your call." She woke to alarms blaring. The Vrakul were attacking again. The third day was hell incarnate. Warlord Krozith had clearly decided to end the embarrassment. He committed his entire fleet to a coordinated assault, hitting the outpost from 6 directions simultaneously. Vrakul ships moved in perfect formation, their tactics adapted to counter everything Lyra had thrown at them. The defensive batteries fell silent one by one, their power cells exhausted or their mounting points destroyed. The shield generators finally failed completely, leaving the station's hull exposed to direct fire. Breaching pods slammed into the outer sections, disgorging Vrakul shock troops who fought their way through the corridors with savage efficiency. Lyra pulled her remaining crew back to the command center, establishing a final defensive perimeter. 16 survivors now, all of them wounded to some degree. They barricaded the entrances, set up automated turrets and prepared for the end. "It's been an honor, Commander," Torvin said, checking his plasma rifle with his remaining arm. The big Krenth looked like he had been through a meat grinder, but his eyes still burned with defiant fire. "The honor was mine," Lyra replied honestly. She looked at each face in the command center. Species from across the coalition, united in their final stand. They had become family over these 3 days of horror. Specialist Nero was still at her console, monitoring the communication array. She had refused to leave her post even as explosions rocked the station. "Commander," she called out suddenly. "The emergency signal, it's being answered." Every head in the command center turned toward her. "What?" Lyra's voice cracked for the first time in 3 days. Neera's compound eyes were wide with shock. "Something just entered the system. Quantum signatures like nothing in our database. They're broadcasting on the old human frequency codes. Commander, they're saying they received our message." The command center erupted in disbelieving shouts. Lyra stumbled to the console, her legs suddenly weak. "Put it on speakers. Now." Neera's fingers flew across the controls. Static filled the room, then cleared to reveal a voice, speaking in perfect coalition standard, but with an accent that sounded ancient, like listening to recordings from history files. "Outpost Sentinel 9, this is TCS Resolute, Terran Colonial Navy. We received your distress call. Hold your position. We are inbound." Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Then Torvin laughed, a deep, booming sound of pure disbelief. "By all the stars that burn," he breathed. "They came. The humans actually came. Where are they?" Lyra demanded, her command instincts overriding her shock. "Neera, get me visual confirmation." The specialist pulled up the long-range sensor displays. The readings were chaos. The entire system was full of Vrokul ships and weapons fire. But there, at the edge of the system, something was appearing. Something big. "Visual acquired," Neera announced. Transferring to main screen. The central display flickered to life, showing the starfield at the system's boundary. Space itself seemed to tear open, not the normal shimmer of slipspace emergence, but something far more dramatic. Reality folded like paper, and through the rupture came ships. No, not ships. Warships. Leviathans. The lead vessel was enormous, easily 3 times the size of a Vrokul battlecruiser. Its hull was a midnight blue that seemed to absorb light, edged with lines of brilliant white energy. The design was like nothing in the Coalition database, smooth and organic in places, sharp and angular in others, as if someone had combined art and lethality into a single form. Behind it came more ships. Cruisers, destroyers, carrier groups, each one bearing the same distinctive design philosophy. The Terran fleet had arrived. "How many?" Lyra asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Counting now," Neera said, her antennae trembling. 12 capital ships, 38 escort vessels, and, "Commander, I'm detecting thousands of smaller craft. They're launching fighter wings." On the main screen, the lead ship, the Resolute, moved forward with impossible grace for something so massive. Its weapons arrays came online, and the sensor display lit up like a star chart. Energy signatures that made no sense, power outputs that exceeded Coalition theoretical maximums, and shield harmonics that looked more like gravitational anomalies than defensive fields. The Vrokul had noticed the new arrivals. Warlord Krasatha's fleet was repositioning, turning away from the outpost to face this unknown threat. Lyra could imagine the confusion on the enemy command ships. Who were these newcomers? What kind of vessels were those? The Resolute opened a channel. This time, the voice was different, deeper, with an authority that carried across the void like a physical presence. "This is Captain Aaron Holt of the Terran colonial ship Resolute, speaking to all vessels in this system. To the Orion Coalition forces. We have come in response to your distress call. You are no longer alone. To the Vrokul Dominion forces. You are operating in violation of galactic sovereignty, engaging in systematic enslavement, and prosecuting a war of extermination. You will cease all hostile actions immediately and withdraw from Coalition space." In the command center of Outpost Sentinel 9, the surviving crew stared at the screen in amazement. Lyra felt something she had not felt in months. Hope. Real, tangible hope. The response from the Vrokul came quickly. Warlord Krasatha's voice was a guttural snarl, translated by the communication systems. "Unknown vessels, you dare threaten the Vrokul Dominion? We know of you, humans, the extinct legends, the cowards who fled the galaxy. You abandoned these weaklings once. You will not save them now. We have 200 warships. You have 12. Surrender your vessels, or we will add your species to our slave armies." Lyra's blood ran cold. The math was terrible. 12 Terran ships against 200 Vrokul warships. No matter how advanced human technology might be, those were impossible odds. But Captain Holt's response came without hesitation, and his tone carried something that made Lyra's scales ripple. Not fear, but cold, absolute confidence. "Warlord Krasatha, you mistake our patience for weakness. You mistake our absence for cowardice. And you mistake your numbers for strength. We gave you a chance to withdraw. You have chosen to test whether the legends were true. Very well. Let me answer your question. Yes. The legends were true. And you are about to learn why the old galaxy feared us. The channel closed. For 5 seconds nothing happened. The Vrakul fleet held position, perhaps confused by the audacity of the human response. The coalition survivors in the outpost held their breath. Then the Resolute fired. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations. It would be called impossible, miraculous, and terrifying in equal measure. Lyra Venn, who had fought in 17 major engagements and commanded fleets through desperate battles, would later testify that she had never seen anything like it. The Resolute's forward batteries opened up with weapons that coalition science could barely categorize. Singularity cannons that created miniature black holes at the point of impact, tearing Vrakul cruisers apart from the inside out. Directed energy beams that didn't just burn through shields, they ignored them entirely, phasing through defensive fields to strike hull directly. And something the humans called disruptor torpedoes, that caused Vrakul ships to simply stop functioning, their biomechanical systems shut down in cascading failures. The Vrakul formation erupted in fire and chaos. In the first 30 seconds of engagement, 16 enemy warships were destroyed outright. 20 more were crippled and drifting. The Vrakul counterattacked with desperate fury. 200 ships focused their fire on the human fleet, unleashing enough destructive power to vaporize a small moon. Plasma bombardment, kinetic projectiles, bioacid torpedoes, everything the Dominion had developed over centuries of conquest. The attacks hit the Resolute and its escort ships directly, and did nothing. The human shields, they called them quantum displacement fields, didn't just absorb the damage. They seemed to redirect it, shunting the energy into some other dimension. Vrakul weapons flared against the shields and simply vanished, their destructive force nullified. The Terran fighter wings engaged next. Thousands of small craft, each one piloted by what the humans called adaptive AI. Artificial intelligences that learned and evolved during combat. They moved through the battlefield like schools of predatory fish, tearing through Vrakul fighter screens with contemptuous ease. Lyra watched in stunned silence as the most feared military force in the galaxy was systematically dismantled. The Vrakul were panicking now, their formations breaking apart as they tried to scatter. But the human ships pursued with relentless precision, their movements coordinated with inhuman perfection. The other Terran capital ships joined the engagement. A heavy cruiser called Indomitable fired something the sensor logs identified as a temporal disruption pulse. Whatever it hit seemed to age centuries in seconds, hulls corroding and systems failing from accelerated entropy. A carrier named Valiant launched specialized strike craft that attached to Vrakul battleships and bored through their hulls like parasites, detonating from within. In less than 4 minutes, half the Vrakul fleet was destroyed or disabled. Warlord Krasith's flagship, the Eternal Suffering, tried to flee. The massive bioship activated its slipspace drives, preparing to jump away from the slaughter. But the Resolute moved with impossible speed. One moment it was kilometers away, the next it was directly in front of the fleeing flagship, blocking its escape. Captain Holt's voice came over the open channel, cold and final. You enslaved worlds, Warlord. You turned living beings into tools. You made an empire of suffering. No. You don't get to run. The Resolute fired a single shot from its main cannon, a weapon the tactical display labeled as a quantum singularity projector. The beam struck the Eternal Suffering at the precise center of its mass. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the Vrakul flagship simply collapsed in on itself, crushed by artificial gravity into a sphere no larger than a fighter craft. A moment later, it exploded, the compressed matter releasing enough energy to vaporize everything within a kilometer radius. Warlord Krasith, the Butcher of 17 Worlds, was gone. His flagship was dust. The remaining Vrakul ships scattered in all directions, their formation completely broken, their morale shattered. Some tried to fight. The human fleet destroyed them with clinical efficiency. Others tried to flee. The Terran cruisers ran them down, their drive somehow faster than the Vrakul slipspace engines. In 7 minutes and 42 seconds, the Battle of Kari's system was over. 200 Vrakul warships reduced to debris and fleeing survivors. The Terran fleet had not lost a single vessel. Outpost Sentinel-9 sensors could barely process the data. It was the most one-sided engagement in recorded military history. In the command center nobody spoke. They couldn't. The sheer impossibility of what they had just witnessed had left them speechless. Specialist Nira finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. Commander, they're hailing us again. Lyra found her voice with effort. Put them through. Captain Aaron Holt appeared on the main screen for the first time. He was human. That much was obvious, though the details were striking. Dark skin marked with scars that suggested a lifetime of combat. Eyes that carried an intensity Lyra had only seen in soldiers who had survived hell. His uniform was midnight blue with silver trim, bearing insignia that meant nothing to Coalition databases but radiated authority nonetheless. "Commander Lyra Ven," he said, and somehow he already knew her name. "We're dispatching medical teams and engineering crews to your position. Your wounded will be treated, your station will be repaired, and your dead will be honored. You held the line when all seemed lost. You sent the call when hope seemed dead. We heard you, Commander. And we came." Lyra felt tears streaming down her scaled face, tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed through 3 days of horror. Her voice cracked as she responded. "Captain Holt, I don't understand. Your species vanished centuries ago. We thought you were extinct. We thought we were signaling ghosts. Why did you come back?" Captain Holt's expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained intense. "Because you needed us, Commander. Because we heard a people crying out against oppression and slavery. Because we once promised the galaxy that while humanity drew breath, no species would be chained. We kept that promise then. We keep it now." He paused, then added more quietly, "We left the galaxy to heal our own wounds, to become better than we were. But we never stopped listening. And when we heard your call, there was only ever one choice." Behind Lyra, Torvin let out a laugh that was half sob. "You beautiful, terrifying bastards," the Krent said, slumping against the console. "You actually came. You actually came. Rest now, Sentinel-9, Captain Holt said gently. "You've earned it. We'll take it from here. The Vrakul Dominion is about to learn what it means to challenge humanity. And Commander?" His voice hardened again. "They're going to learn that humanity does not tolerate slavers. We will not stop until every chain is broken and every slave is free. That is our promise to you and to every being suffering under their tyranny." The screen went dark. Around Lyra, her crew was crying, laughing, or simply staring at the tactical display where Terran ships were moving into protective formation around the outpost. Nira was hugging another officer. Torvin had finally allowed himself to collapse from exhaustion and blood loss. Lyra looked out the observation window where, moments before, she had watched certain death approaching. Now she saw something different: human ships, powerful and beautiful, standing between the outpost and any further threat. And beyond them, the stars seemed brighter somehow, as if the galaxy itself had been given new hope. The humans had returned. And the galaxy would never be the same. The price of freedom. The news spread across the Orion Coalition like wildfire through dry grass. In less than 6 hours, every major government, every military command, and every civilian population in Coalition space knew the impossible truth: humanity had returned. The species that vanished 4 centuries ago had reappeared in the Kari system, destroyed a massive Vrakul fleet in under 8 minutes, and declared their intention to stand against the Dominion. The galaxy's reaction was immediate and chaotic. On the Coalition capital world of Serranis Prime, the High Council convened an emergency session within 2 hours of receiving the first reports. 23 species representatives gathered in the ancient Hall of Unity, their voices raised in argument that ranged from jubilant celebration to paranoid terror. "This is salvation," shouted Ambassador Thelvar, a Quellan diplomat whose entire family had died in a Vrakul raid. "The humans have returned to help us. We should welcome them with open arms and beg them to lead the counteroffensive." "This is catastrophe," countered Security Director Vorn, a Selkari military strategist whose scales had gone pale gray with stress. "We know nothing about modern humanity. They disappeared for 400 years, and now they return with weapons that make our entire fleet look like toys? What if they're here to conquer us rather than save us?" Council leader Miraseth, an ancient Thalan whose crystalline body had witnessed 2 centuries of galactic history, raised her hand for silence. The arguing voices quieted, though tension remained thick in the air. "We must be rational," Miraseth said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "The facts are clear. Humanity intervened to save Outpost Sentinel-9. They destroyed a Vrakul fleet that would have proceeded to attack our core worlds. These are not the actions of conquerors." However, Director Vorn raises valid concerns. "The power gap between humanity and the rest of the Coalition is alarming." She gestured to the holographic display at the center of the chamber, which showed the tactical replay of the Kari system battle. The assembled representatives watched in silence as Terran ships systematically annihilated Vrakul forces with terrifying efficiency. "This is beyond anything in our theoretical weapons research," admitted Chief Scientist Nara, a brilliant Krenth researcher who had devoted her life to military technology. The energy outputs alone should be impossible. Their shields violate several established laws of physics. And their fighters. Our analysts believe they're using sentient artificial intelligence, which we haven't been able to develop despite centuries of research. So humanity is centuries ahead of us technologically, Thelvar said. That makes them better allies, not worse ones. We need their help against the Vrakul. Or it makes them existential threats, Vorn countered. What happens when they finish with the Vrakul? Do they just leave again? Or do they decide that the coalition would be better off under human guidance? The council chamber erupted in renewed argument. Miraseth let it continue for several minutes before raising her hand again. This debate is premature, she declared. We will meet with the humans face to face. They have requested a diplomatic audience and we will grant it. Captain Holt and his senior staff will arrive at Serranis Prime in 2 days. At that meeting, we will determine humanity's intentions and decide our response accordingly. The council reluctantly agreed. As the representatives filed out, murmuring among themselves, Miraseth remained in the chamber, staring at the holographic display. She thought about the ancient records, the stories of humans fighting alongside their allies, dying to protect species they barely knew, standing against tyranny with absolute conviction. She hoped those stories were true. Because if they weren't, the galaxy had just witnessed the arrival of something far more dangerous than the Vrakul. Meanwhile, in Dominion space, a very different meeting was taking place. The Imperial Throne world of Vraktur was a monument to the Dominion's philosophy, a planet entirely covered in obsidian towers, slave factories and military installations. No green remained on its surface. No beauty existed that did not serve power. It was a world that existed solely to project fear. In the highest tower, Emperor Thurak Van received the news of Warlord Krozatha's defeat with cold fury. Thurak Van was massive even by Vrakul standards, 3 meters tall, his exoskeleton augmented with biomechanical enhancements that made him a living weapon. His 4 eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence, and his voice carried the weight of centuries of absolute rule. Explain, he commanded, his tone making the assembled generals flinch. Explain how 200 warships, commanded by one of our finest warlords, were annihilated by 12 vessels from a species that should not exist. General Skarvik, the Dominion's master of war, stepped forward with visible reluctance. Emperor, the tactical data is unprecedented. The human vessels employed weapons technology far beyond anything in our database. Our plasma bombardment had no effect on their shields. Our bioships were destroyed before they could engage. And their counter-weapons? He paused, his mandibles clicking with distress. Emperor, they had weapons that created artificial singularities, that phased through our shields, that shut down our biosystems remotely. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Thurak Van's claws scraped against the arms of his throne, leaving deep gouges in the metal. Humans? The mythical species from the old archives. Our intelligence said they were extinct. Our intelligence was wrong, Emperor, Skarvik admitted. Humanity has been in hiding, apparently advancing their technology beyond anything the galaxy has seen. And now they have chosen to reveal themselves, specifically to oppose us. Then we will destroy them as we have destroyed every other species that stood against the Dominion, Thurak Van declared. Mobilize the entire Imperial Armada. Every battle fleet, every assault legion, every bioweapon in our arsenal. If these humans think their technology makes them gods, they will learn that gods bleed when cut with sufficient force. Emperor, interjected Admiral Vrextal, one of the few Vrakul who had survived encounters with human forces in the ancient wars. He was old, his exoskeleton scarred from centuries of combat. I must counsel caution. The ancient records speak of human warfare capabilities that were extraordinary. They did not just fight with superior technology. They fought with a level of determination and tactical adaptability that made them unpredictable. If the modern humans have retained those traits and augmented them with advanced technology, are you suggesting we surrender? Thurak Van's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. I am suggesting we proceed carefully, Emperor. Perhaps open communication. Determine their objectives. If they merely wish to protect the coalition, we could negotiate a temporary truce while we assess their capabilities more thoroughly. No. Thurak Van rose from his throne, his massive form radiating fury. The Dominion does not negotiate with prey. The Dominion does not show weakness. We have conquered 18 species over the past 2 centuries. We have an empire spanning 200 systems. And you suggest we cower before 12 ships and a handful of legends. Vrextal bowed his head in submission, recognizing the futility of argument. Mobilize the fleet, Thurak Van commanded again. I want every warship we possess at the border between Dominion and Coalition space within 10 days. We will crush these humans and their Coalition allies simultaneously. And when we have defeated them, we will find their home worlds and turn every human into a slave. They will serve the Dominion for the rest of existence, a warning to any species that dares challenge our supremacy. The generals bowed and departed to execute their orders. Thurak Van remained on his throne, staring at the holographic display of the Kari system battle. His 4 eyes tracked the movements of the human ships with cold analysis. Powerful, yes. Technologically superior, certainly. But nothing was invincible. Everything could be destroyed given sufficient force. The Vrakul Dominion had survived for 1,000 years by being more brutal, more ruthless, and more willing to pay any cost than their enemies. If humanity thought their advanced weapons would be enough to stop the Dominion, they were about to learn a harsh lesson. Thurak Van smiled, an expression of pure malice. This war would be glorious. And when it ended, humanity would wish they had remained hidden in whatever dark corner of the galaxy they had fled to. 2 days later, Captain Aaron Holt stood in the Hall of Unity on Serranis Prime, facing the assembled High Council of the Orion Coalition. He had brought 6 members of his senior staff, Commander Sarah Chin, his tactical officer, Dr. Marcus Okafor, chief scientist, Lieutenant Commander Raj Patel, head of fighter operations, and 3 other specialists. All wore their formal dress uniforms, midnight blue with silver trim, bearing the insignia of the Terran Colonial Navy. The coalition representatives stared at them with a mixture of hope, curiosity, and apprehension. Captain Holt understood their confusion. To them, humans were myths that had suddenly become real. The cognitive dissonance must be overwhelming. Council leader Miraseth spoke first, her crystalline voice clear and formal. Captain Holt, on behalf of the Orion Coalition, we welcome you and your delegation. We have many questions, but let us begin with the most important. Why has humanity returned after 400 years of silence? Holt had prepared for this question. He had debated with his staff and with command about how much to reveal. The decision had been made at the highest levels. Honesty but not complete transparency. Not yet. Council leader, representatives of the coalition, Holt began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Humanity did not vanish from the galaxy because we were destroyed or because we transcended. We left because we were broken. The chamber went silent. Every representative leaned forward, listening intently. 400 years ago, humanity was engaged in what we called the Silence War, Holt continued. It was a civil conflict that threatened to destroy our entire species. Human fought human across dozens of systems. Weapons were used that scarred planets. Entire colonies were lost. We had become so focused on defeating each other that we forgot why we were fighting in the first place. He paused, letting the weight of that admission settle. When the war finally ended, not with victory but with exhaustion, what remained of humanity looked at ourselves and realized we had become the very thing we claimed to oppose. Destructive, expansionist, and willing to sacrifice everything for power. So we made a choice. We withdrew from the galaxy. We went home to our core systems, sealed our borders, and spent the next 4 centuries doing something harder than any war. We rebuilt our civilization from the ground up. Commander Chin stepped forward, adding to her captain's narrative. We restructured our government, reformed our military, developed new technologies focused on defense rather than conquest, and most importantly, we spent generations teaching our children a different way. We learned to value life, all life, above power. We learned that strength without purpose is just destruction. But we never stopped monitoring the galaxy, Holt resumed. We had listening posts, long-range sensors, and observers who kept track of major events. We watched the coalition grow. We watched new species join your alliance. And 3 weeks ago, we watched the Vrakul Dominion begin its campaign of systematic enslavement. We debated among ourselves whether to intervene. The debate ended the moment we received Commander Ven's distress call. Ambassador Thelvar stood, his voice eager. Then you are here to help us defeat the Vrakul? To stand with the coalition against tyranny? We are here to end slavery, Holt corrected, his tone firm. We are here because the Vrakul Dominion represents everything humanity fought against. Everything we refuse to allow in a galaxy where we have the power to stop it. But Captain, we are not here to conquer. We are not here to rule. We are offering an alliance, not demanding vassalage. Security Director Vorn rose next, his expression skeptical. You speak noble words, Captain. But your weapons suggest you could conquer us easily if you wished. Why should we trust that you won't? Holt met his gaze directly. Because we could have conquered you any time in the past 400 years, Director. We had the technology. We had the capability. We chose not to because conquest was never our goal. We left the galaxy to become better than we were. We have returned to prove that we succeeded. Dr. Okafor stepped forward, addressing the council with the calm authority of a scientist. If I may, council members, I can provide specifics on what humanity is offering. We are prepared to share defensive technology with the coalition. Improved shield generators, enhanced sensor arrays, and medical technology that will save countless lives. We are not offering offensive weapons technology, that remains restricted. But we will fight alongside you. Our fleet will integrate with yours. Our soldiers will train yours. And together we will break the Vrakul Dominion. Why not share your weapons? Demanded Chief Scientist Nara. If you truly want to help us, why hold back your most powerful technology? Because power without wisdom is dangerous, Holt answered bluntly. The coalition is not ready for singularity weapons or quantum disruptors. Not because you lack intelligence, but because you lack the cultural and ethical frameworks necessary to wield such weapons responsibly. We learned that lesson the hard way during the Silence War. We will not inflict that pain on another species by handing them weapons they're not prepared to control. The chamber erupted in mixed reactions, some representatives nodding in understanding, others objecting to what they saw as condescension. Council Leader Miraseth raised her hand for silence again. You speak of alliance, Captain, she said thoughtfully. What does such an alliance entail? What are your terms? Simple terms, Holt replied. We fight together against the Vrakul. We share intelligence and coordinate strategy. When the war is won, we establish formal diplomatic relations between humanity and the coalition. We become partners in maintaining galactic peace, equals, not master and servant. And after the war? Vorn pressed. What prevents you from simply taking control once the Vrakul are defeated? Our own laws, Commander Chin answered. The Terran Charter, which governs all human actions in galactic affairs, explicitly forbids conquest of allied species and mandates respect for sovereign rights. Breaking those laws would result in immediate prosecution under our justice system, which applies equally to all humans regardless of rank. You expect us to simply trust your internal laws? Vorn asked incredulously. No, Holt said. I expect you to watch our actions and judge for yourselves. We're not asking for blind faith. We're asking for a chance to prove that humanity has learned from its mistakes. Let us fight alongside you. Let us shed blood defending your worlds. And when the war is over, if you want us to leave, we will leave. We're not here to stay where we're not wanted. The council chamber fell silent as representatives considered his words. Finally, Ambassador Thelvar stood again. I propose we accept humanity's offer of alliance, he declared. The Vrakul are at our doorstep. They will not negotiate. They will not show mercy. We can debate philosophy and trust after we've ensured our species survive. Right now, we need allies who can fight, and Captain Holt has proven his people can fight very effectively indeed. The motion was seconded and put to vote. The result was not unanimous. Several representatives abstained and a handful voted against, but the majority carried the decision. The Orion Coalition and humanity would form an alliance against the Vrakul Dominion. After the formal proceedings concluded, Council Leader Miraseth requested a private meeting with Captain Holt. They stood together in a small garden within the Hall of Unity, surrounded by plants from a dozen different worlds. You spoke carefully in there, Captain, Miraseth observed. You told truth but not the whole truth. What are you not saying? Holt respected her perception. How do you know I'm holding something back? Because I'm 700 years old, and I've learned to recognize when someone is choosing their words very deliberately, the ancient Thalan replied. What I want to know is whether you're hiding something dangerous to the coalition. Holt considered his words carefully. Not dangerous to the coalition. But yes, I'm not telling you everything. There are aspects of humanity's withdrawal and development that remain classified. Not because we don't trust you, but because knowledge of certain technologies could be destabilizing. In time, as our alliance strengthens, more will be shared. But right now, Council Leader, I'm asking you to trust that we're withholding information for good reasons. Mirasetha's crystalline features reflected the garden's light in complex patterns. An honest answer, at least. Very well, Captain. We will trust you, provisionally. But understand this, the coalition has been burned by secrets before. If we discover you've hidden something that endangers my people, our alliance will end immediately. Understood and agreed, Holt said. Now, may I speak frankly about the military situation? Please do. The Vrak hull will respond to their defeat at Karis with overwhelming force. Emperor Thurak Van is not a strategic thinker. He's a conqueror who believes in brute force. My intelligence estimates he'll mobilize their entire Imperial Armada and launch a massive assault on the Coalition Dominion border. They'll commit everything they have to crushing us before we can establish a solid defensive line. How long do we have? Miraseth asked. 8 to 10 days. Maybe less if Thurak Van is more aggressive than we expect. That's not enough time to coordinate a proper defense. Which is why we're not going to defend, Holt said, his expression hardening. We're going to attack. Mirasetha's crystalline body flickered with shock. Attack? Captain, you just said the Vrak hull are mobilizing their entire fleet? And they'll be concentrated at the border, expecting us to fortify and wait for them. Instead, we're going to do what the Coalition has never been able to do. We're going to take the war into Dominion space. We're going to hit their supply lines, liberate their slave worlds, and force them to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. The Vrak hull are conquerors, Council Leader. They've never had to defend their territory from a peer adversary. That's their weakness. You're talking about liberating slave worlds? Mirasetha's voice carried both hope and doubt. The Vrak hull have enslaved billions across dozens of systems. How do you propose to free them? We've developed a countermeasure, Holt explained. A quantum disruption field that can disable Vrak hull neural control implants within a specific area. It's not perfect, it requires close proximity and considerable power, but it works. Every slave soldier forced to fight for the Dominion can be freed. And once freed, many of them will join us. The Dominion's greatest strength, their enslaved armies, will become their greatest weakness. Miraseth was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. You're proposing to start a galactic slave rebellion. I'm proposing to give enslaved beings their freedom back, Holt corrected. What they do with that freedom is their choice. But yes, I expect many will choose to fight against their former masters. Wouldn't you? This plan is incredibly dangerous. If it fails, we're no worse off than if we had stayed defensive, Holt said. But if it succeeds, Council Leader, we won't just defeat the Vrak hull Dominion. We'll dismantle it from within. We'll free every slave, liberate every conquered world, and ensure that the Dominion can never rise again. Miraseth looked at the human captain with new understanding. This was not just a military strategy. This was an ideological crusade. Humanity had returned not merely to fight a war, but to reshape the moral landscape of the galaxy. You really believe in this? She said softly. This isn't political maneuvering or strategic calculation. You genuinely care about freeing those slaves. We do, Holt confirmed. Because 400 years ago humanity was enslaved by its own worst instincts, hatred, fear, greed. We spent generations freeing ourselves from those chains. Now we have the power to free others from literal chains. How could we do anything else? 6 days later, the Terran Coalition Joint Defense Force assembled at the border system of Arcturus Prime. It was the largest military fleet ever gathered in Coalition history. 93 Coalition vessels from 17 different species, supported by 38 Terran warships. The combined force represented the Coalition's best fleets and humanity's forward strike groups. On the bridge of the TCS Resolute, Captain Holt watched the formation come together with satisfaction. His tactical display showed Coalition ships taking positions alongside Terran vessels, their crews in constant communication as they coordinated their systems. Joint training exercises went better than expected, Commander Chin reported. The Coalition captains are adapting quickly to our tactical doctrines. They're still struggling with some of the more advanced maneuvers, but they're learning. They're experienced warriors, Holt acknowledged. They just haven't had access to the tools they needed. That's changing now. Dr. Okafor approached with a data pad. Captain, I've completed the distribution of the shield enhancement packages to all Coalition vessels. Their defensive capabilities have increased by approximately 40%. It's not quite up to our standards, but it's a significant improvement over what they had. Good work, Doctor, Holt said. What about the disruption field generators? Installed on all capital ships, both Terran and Coalition. We have sufficient coverage to disable neural implants across approximately 35 square kilometers simultaneously. More than enough for what we're planning. Lieutenant Commander Patel entered the bridge, his expression energized. Captain, the fighter wings are fully integrated. We've got Coalition pilots flying alongside our AI-driven units. They're calling themselves the Liberation Wings. Morale is through the roof. Holt smiled slightly. Good morale was crucial for what came next. All ships, this is Captain Holt, he broadcast on the fleet-wide channel. In approximately 2 hours, we will enter slipspace and begin our assault on Dominion territory. Our first target is the Kalar system, a Vrakul military installation and processing center for newly enslaved populations. Intelligence indicates approximately 300,000 enslaved beings are currently held there, awaiting neural implantation. He paused, letting that number sink in. 300,000 lives hanging in the balance. Our mission is threefold, Holt continued. First, destroy the Vrakul military presence. Second, free every enslaved being in the system. Third, establish a foothold that will allow us to push deeper into Dominion space. This will not be easy. The Vrakul will fight with everything they have. But remember why we're here. Every being deserves freedom. Every chain must be broken. And we are the ones who will break them. Across the fleet, crews responded with determination. Coalition captains echoed Holt's words to their own crews in dozens of different languages. Terran personnel checked their weapons and systems with practiced efficiency. All ships reporting ready, sir, Chin announced. Slipspace drives are charged and synchronized. Holt took a deep breath, thinking about the path that had led here. Humanity's long isolation. The desperate signal from a dying outpost. The choice to return and fight for species they barely remembered. And now, standing at the edge of a war that would reshape the galaxy. Execute jump, he commanded. All ships into the breach. For freedom. For justice. For every being who has suffered under tyranny. The fleet entered slipspace as one, reality bending around them as they crossed the vast distances between stars. When they emerged, they would be deep in enemy territory, striking at the heart of the Vrakul Dominion. The war for galactic freedom had truly begun. In the Kalar system, Vrakul Commander Shrek Thar received the warning barely 30 seconds before the Terran Coalition fleet emerged from slipspace. Unknown contacts. Massive slipspace signatures. There. The sensor officer never finished the sentence. The combined fleet appeared in perfect attack formation, surrounding the Vrakul installation from multiple vectors. What is this? Shrekthar demanded. Coalition forces this deep in Dominion space? Impossible. Sir, I'm detecting Terran signatures. The humans are here. Shrekthar felt his blood run cold. Reports of the Kari system massacre had spread through the Dominion military like a plague, demoralizing even veteran commanders. The humans had destroyed a full fleet in minutes. And now they were here, along with coalition reinforcements. Battle stations. All ships engage. Send a distress call to. The Resolute fired. Not at the Vrakul warships, but at the installation itself, specifically at the power generators that maintain the neural control network. The Singularity cannon struck with precise targeting, creating a miniature black hole that consumed the generators in seconds. Across the installation, hundreds of thousands of enslaved beings suddenly felt the neural control release. The implants went dead, no longer suppressing their will. For a moment there was confusion. Then there was rage. The enslaved workers, soldiers, and prisoners who had been forced to serve the Vrakul turned on their captors with a fury born of years of suffering. The Vrakul guards, caught completely off guard, were overwhelmed in seconds. What's happening? Shrekthar screamed as reports flooded in of slave rebellions across every section of the installation. The neural control network is down, his second-in-command reported. The slaves are free. They're killing everyone. Then activate the failsafe. Trigger the self-destruct protocol. Sir, the humans are jamming our. The Resolute fired again, this time targeting the command ship. Shrekthar had just enough time to realize that humanity was not here to negotiate or show mercy. They were here to dismantle the Dominion one system at a time. The command ship exploded. The remaining Vrakul vessels tried to flee, but coalition cruisers had positioned themselves to block every escape route. The battle lasted less than 6 minutes. When it ended, the Kalar system was free. 300,000 formerly enslaved beings stood in the ruins of their prison, looking at the sky where Terran and coalition ships floated like guardian angels. Captain Holt broadcast a message to the entire system. People of Kalar, you are free. The Vrakul will never control you again. We offer you medical treatment, transportation to safe worlds, and the choice to join us in liberating others. The choice is yours. But know this, you are not alone. We will fight for every enslaved being in the galaxy until every chain is broken. Across the liberated installation, beings from dozens of species wept with relief, embraced each other, and looked toward the Terran ships with something that resembled worship. Humanity had returned, and they had brought freedom with them. Over the next 10 days, the Terran Coalition fleet struck at 12 more systems, each one a Vrakul slave processing center or military installation. The pattern was always the same. Sudden appearance, overwhelming firepower, disruption of neural control networks, and liberation of enslaved populations. The freed slaves numbered in the millions. Many chose to join the growing resistance movement, taking up arms against their former masters with desperate fury. The Dominion's slave armies began to rebel even before the liberation fleets arrived, as word spread that the humans could free them. Emperor Thurak Van's response was predictable and brutal. He ordered the execution of entire slave populations and systems the fleet hadn't yet reached, trying to deny the humans their propaganda victories. But this only intensified the rebellions, as enslaved beings realized they had nothing to lose. The Dominion was collapsing from within. But Thurak Van was not defeated yet. He had gathered his full imperial armada, over 800 warships, the largest military force ever assembled in Dominion history. He was preparing to make a final stand in the Crimson Expanse, a strategic region that controlled access to the Dominion's core worlds. Intelligence reported that Thurak Van himself would command the fleet personally. He had sworn to destroy the humans even if it cost him everything. The final battle was coming. The Battle of the Crimson Expanse would be remembered as the single most significant military engagement in galactic history. On one side, Emperor Thurak Van's Imperial Armada, 817 Vrakul warships, including the Emperor's flagship Eternal Dominion, a biomechanical monstrosity the size of a small moon. On the other side, the Terran Coalition Joint Defense Force, 147 vessels, bolstered by 300 smaller craft piloted by former slaves who had joined the Liberation Wings. The numbers heavily favored the Dominion. But numbers weren't everything. Captain Aaron Holt stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the enemy fleet assemble across the expanse. His senior staff surrounded him, their expressions grim but determined. "They've brought everything," Commander Chin observed. "Every ship, every weapon, every biohorror they've developed over centuries." "Good," Holt said quietly. "We end this today. One way or another." "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the enemy flagship," reported the communications officer. "Emperor Thurak Van is hailing us personally." "Put him through." The main screen flickered to reveal Emperor Thurak Van in all his horrifying glory. The Vrakul Emperor was a creature of nightmares, enhanced with biomechanical weapons that made him more machine than being, his 4 eyes burning with malevolent intelligence. "Captain Holt," Thurak Van's voice was a guttural growl. "You have become a considerable irritation. You have freed slaves that were rightfully mine. You have destroyed my installations. You have dared to challenge the supremacy of the Dominion. This ends now." "You're right," Holt agreed calmly. "This does end now. Surrender your fleet, release every remaining enslaved being in your territory, and stand trial for crimes against sentient life. Do this and we will show mercy." Thurak Van laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Mercy? From the species that vanished like cowards 400 years ago? I reject your mercy, human. I reject your righteousness. And I reject your interference. When this battle is over, your ships will be scrap. Your people will be enslaved. And the galaxy will remember that the Vrakul Dominion cannot be challenged. Then let's see if your ships fight as well as your mouth does," Holt said and cut the connection. He turned to his crew. "All ships, battle formation Delta 7. Coalition vessels, take your positions as we rehearsed. Disruption field generators at maximum power. Fighter wings, prepare for launch. And someone remind the Liberation Wings that this is what we've been fighting for, not just their freedom but the end of the Dominion forever." "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Patel reported. "Liberation Wings are responding. They say they're ready to die for this if necessary." "Then let's make sure they don't have to," Holt said firmly. "All ships engage." The Battle of the Crimson Expanse began with a thunderclap that echoed across the void. 800 Vrakul warships surged forward in a massive wall of biomechanical horror. Their weapons, plasma cannons, bioacid launchers, kinetic projectiles, and neural disruptors, lit up the void like a miniature star-going supernova. The Terran Coalition fleet met them head-on. The Resolute and her sister ships activated their quantum displacement shields, redirecting the incoming fire into other dimensions. Coalition vessels, now equipped with enhanced shields, weathered the assault far better than they would have weeks ago. The formation held. "Return fire," Holt commanded. "Target their command structure first." The Terran warships unleashed their terrible weapons. Singularity cannons tore through Vrakul battlecruisers. Directed energy beams phased through shields to strike vulnerable systems. Temporal disruption pulses aged entire sections of enemy ships into corroded husks. The coalition vessels added their own firepower, less advanced but no less determined. Their captains had learned from the Terran tactics, focusing fire on specific targets, coordinating their attacks to overwhelm enemy shields. The Vrakul front line erupted in explosions. But Thurak Van had learned from his previous defeats. He had adapted. His fleet dispersed, refusing to cluster where singularity weapons could devastate multiple ships at once. He launched waves of suicide craft, small vessels piloted by enslaved beings, their neural implants forcing them to kamikaze into the Terran coalition formation. The Liberation Wings intercepted them. Former slaves piloting coalition and Terran fighters engaged their mind-controlled brethren with savage precision. They knew the suicide pilots had no choice, no free will. So they targeted the control systems of the suicide craft rather than the pilots themselves, disabling the vessels without killing the enslaved beings inside. It was messy, desperate combat. Dozens of Liberation Wings fighters were destroyed. But they held the line. Dr. Okafor activated the disruption field generators at maximum power. The quantum fields rippled across the battlefield, reaching out to touch Vrakul ships and their enslaved crews. The neural implants began to fail by the thousands. Across the Dominion fleet, enslaved soldiers and crew members suddenly found themselves free. Many collapsed from the shock. Others immediately turned on their captors. Vrakul ships began to suffer internal rebellions, their crews literally fighting each other in the corridors while the external battle raged. "It's working," Commander Chin reported. "We're detecting mass failures in their neural control networks. Vrakul ships are going dark as their enslaved crews revolt." "Keep the pressure on," Holt commanded. "Don't give them time to regroup." But Emperor Thurak Van was not finished. His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, pushed forward through the chaos. The massive bioship was a weapon unto itself, its hull bristling with organic weapons that fired living projectiles, bioengineered creatures that latched onto enemy ships and began eating through their hulls. "The flagship is targeting us directly," Chin warned. "It's powering up some kind of main weapon. Energy signature is, Captain, it's off the scale." "Evasive maneuvers," Holt ordered. "Get us clear of its firing line." The Resolute moved with surprising agility for its size, its maneuvering thrusters firing in perfect synchronization. But the Eternal Dominion's main weapon tracked them, adjusting its aim. The weapon fired, a beam of pure bioenergy that tore through space itself. It struck the Resolute's shields at full force. For 3 seconds, the quantum displacement shields held, redirecting the impossible energy into parallel dimensions. But the sheer power of the attack began to overwhelm the system. Warning klaxons blared across the bridge. "Shields at 30%. Chin shouted. "We can't take another hit like that." "Then we don't give them another shot," Holt said grimly. "All forward batteries, target the flagship's weapon systems." "Commander Patel, I want every fighter we have on that monster. Swarm it. Blind it. Give me an opening." The Terran fighter wings and Liberation Wings descended on the Eternal Dominion like locusts, their weapons strafing the flagship's surface, destroying sensor arrays and weapons emplacements. The massive ship tried to swat them away, but there were too many moving too fast. The Resolute and 3 other Terran capital ships focused their singularity cannons on the flagship's main weapon. The concentrated fire created a localized gravitational anomaly that began to tear the weapon system apart. But Thurak Van was cunning. Even as his main weapon failed, he launched a desperate gambit. Dozens of Vrakul ships broke formation and made suicide runs directly at the Coalition vessels, trying to overwhelm them through sheer mass. "Coalition fleet is taking heavy damage," reported the tactical officer. "They're being overrun." Holt made a split-second decision. "All Terran ships, defensive formation around Coalition vessels. We take the hits. Chin, transfer maximum power to shields." The Terran warships moved to protect their allies, their advanced shields absorbing the suicide attacks that would have destroyed Coalition cruisers. It was a calculated sacrifice. Terran shields could handle more punishment, but it left them vulnerable to Thurak Van's counterattack. The Emperor seized the opportunity. The Eternal Dominion fired again, this time targeting the Indomitable, one of the Terran heavy cruisers that had moved to protect Coalition forces. The beam struck the cruiser directly. Its shields failed. The hull began to burn. "Indomitable is critical," Chin reported, her voice tight. "They're venting atmosphere. Casualties are." "I see it," Holt cut her off, his jaw clenched. "Get rescue ships to them. Now." But even as he gave the order, something unexpected happened. A Coalition cruiser, The CNS Defiance, captained by a Krenth commander named Vextar, moved directly between the Indomitable and the Eternal Dominion, using its own hull to shield the damaged Terran vessel from follow-up attacks. "Captain Vextar, what are you doing?" Holt demanded over the comm. "You can't survive that firepower." Vextar's deep voice came back, strained but determined. "You saved us at Sentinel-9, Captain Holt. You've bled alongside us for weeks. You think we'll let you fight alone now? The Coalition doesn't abandon its allies." The Defiance took hit after hit, its shields failing, its hull breaching in a dozen places. But it held position, buying time for the Indomitable to retreat and for damage control teams to stabilize the Terran cruiser. Holt felt something break inside him, not despair but a different kind of emotion. Pride. Gratitude. The realization that this was no longer just humanity protecting the Coalition. This was an alliance, a true partnership forged in fire and blood. "All ships, concentrate fire on the Eternal Dominion," Holt commanded, his voice carrying across the fleet. "Terran and Coalition together. We end this tyrant now." Every ship in the combined fleet turned its weapons on Emperor Thurakvan's flagship. Singularity cannons, plasma bombardments, kinetic projectiles, directed energy beams, a storm of destructive force converged on the massive bioship. The Eternal Dominion's shields failed. Its hull began to rupture. Biomechanical systems exploded in cascading failures. And still the fleet fired, pouring everything they had into the symbol of the Dominion's tyranny. Inside the dying flagship, Emperor Thurakvan raged and cursed, firing his personal weapons at his own crew in his fury. But there was nothing he could do. His empire was crumbling, his fleet was being destroyed, and his own ship was dying around him. "You cannot defeat the Dominion," he screamed into the comm, his voice broadcast across the battlefield. "We are eternal. We are." The Resolute's final singularity shot struck the Eternal Dominion at its core. A black hole formed at the center of the flagship, consuming it from within. Emperor Thurakvan's scream cut off as his ship collapsed into impossible space, compressed into a singularity that then exploded with the force of a small sun. The shockwave rippled across the battlefield. When it cleared, the Eternal Dominion was gone. Emperor Thurakvan was gone. And the remaining Vrakul fleet, seeing their emperor destroyed, began to break. Ships scattered in all directions. Some tried to flee. Others, their enslaved crews now free, simply went dark as internal rebellions consumed them. A few fought on with desperate fury, but they were systematically destroyed or disabled. The Battle of the Crimson Expanse was over. The Vrakul Dominion had fallen. In the aftermath, Captain Holt stood in the medical bay of the Resolute, visiting the wounded from both Terran and Coalition crews. He had lost 317 personnel in the battle. The Coalition had lost over 2,000. Every death weighed on him like stones. But they had won. Not just a battle but a war. Not just a military victory but something far more important. Freedom for millions of enslaved beings. Commander Chin found him there, staring at a medical pod where one of his junior officers was being treated for severe injuries. "Captain, the Coalition Council is requesting your presence," Chin said gently. "They want to hold a ceremony. Recognition of the victory, formal establishment of the alliance, that sort of thing." "Tell them I'll attend," Holt said quietly. "But Chin, make sure the Liberation Wings are there too. Make sure every freed slave who fought with us is recognized. This wasn't our victory. It was theirs." "Already done, sir," Chin replied with a slight smile. "The council insisted on it. Apparently, Ambassador Thelvar is pushing for a galactic holiday commemorating the liberation." Holt nodded, then asked the question that had been haunting him. "How many total? How many did we free?" "Final count is still coming in," Chin said. "But preliminary estimates are over 6 million enslaved beings across all the systems we liberated. Most are choosing to return to their home worlds. Some are staying with us, joining the Coalition or requesting transport to Terran space. And about 50,000 have asked to enlist in the military. They want to help ensure the Dominion never rises again. 6 million lives. Changed forever. Given back their freedom, their dignity, their future." Holt thought about the long journey humanity had taken. 400 years of isolation, rebuilding, learning to be better than they were. And now, standing at the dawn of a new era, he realized that every year of that journey had been worth it. "Commander, one more thing," Holt said. "Start compiling a list of every Vrakul commander who participated in the enslavement operations. Every official who authorized the neural implants. Every scientist who developed the control technology. We're going to find them and we're going to ensure they face justice." "Understood, sir," Chin said. And the Vrakul civilians? The ones who weren't part of the military or government. They get a choice, Holt said firmly. Just like everyone else. If they're willing to live peacefully under a reformed government that respects rights and dignity, they're welcome to do so. If they choose to continue the Dominion's ideology, they'll be imprisoned. But no one gets enslaved, not even the enslavers. We break the cycle, Chin. That's how we make this victory mean something. 3 weeks later, the Hall of Unity on Serranis Prime hosted the largest gathering of species in Coalition history. Representatives from 47 different worlds attended, along with delegations from the newly freed systems and observers from neutral governments across the galaxy. Captain Aaron Holt stood at the center of the hall, flanked by his senior staff and by Coalition leaders including Council Leader Miraseth. Behind them stood rows of Liberation Wings pilots, former slaves who had fought for their freedom, and wounded warriors from both Terran and Coalition forces. Miraseth addressed the assembly, her crystalline voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Today we mark the end of the Vrakul Dominion and the beginning of a new age. An age where freedom is not a privilege but a fundamental right. An age where species stand together against tyranny. An age made possible by an ally who returned when we needed them most. She turned to Holt. Captain Aaron Holt, on behalf of the Orion Coalition, I present you with the Star of Unity, our highest honor, given to those who have defended the principles we hold most sacred. You and your people came back to a galaxy that had forgotten you, and you reminded us what it means to fight for something greater than ourselves. Holt accepted the medal, a crystalline star that seemed to hold light within itself. He looked at it for a moment, then looked out at the assembled representatives. Thank you, Council Leader, he said. But this honor doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to every being who stood against oppression. Every Coalition officer who refused to surrender. Every enslaved being who found the courage to rebel. Every pilot who flew into impossible odds. This is their victory. He paused, then continued, his voice strengthening. 400 years ago, humanity left the galaxy because we had lost our way. We had become consumed by conflict, by the need to prove our strength, by the belief that power gave us the right to dominate. We were wrong. And it took us centuries to understand just how wrong we were. We returned because we heard a voice in the dark, a desperate plea from beings who refused to accept slavery, who believed that freedom was worth dying for. That voice reminded us of who we were supposed to be. Not conquerors. Not empire builders. But guardians. Protectors of those who cannot protect themselves. The Vrakul Dominion is defeated. But the work is not done. There are still enslaved beings waiting to be freed. There are still wounds to heal, societies to rebuild, justice to deliver. And there are still threats in the galaxy that will test our resolve. So today humanity makes a promise to the Orion Coalition and to all free beings in the galaxy. We will not leave again. We will stand with you. We will defend the principles of freedom and dignity. And anyone who attempts to enslave, oppress, or dominate will find themselves facing not just humanity, but all of us, united, determined, and unwilling to accept a galaxy built on chains. The hall erupted in applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Species who had never met before embraced. Former slaves wept with joy. Coalition officers saluted. And the Terran delegation stood at attention, their expressions proud but humble. Council Leader Miraseth raised her hand for silence. Then let it be recorded, today marks the founding of the Galactic Free Union, a partnership between the Orion Coalition and the Terran people, dedicated to defending freedom, promoting justice, and ensuring that no being in this galaxy lives in chains. We are stronger together. And together, we will build a future worthy of all who fought to make it possible. The applause resumed, even louder than before. Later that evening, Captain Holt stood alone in the same garden where he had first spoken privately with Miraseth. The ancient Thalan found him there, gazing at the stars through the transparent dome overhead. Contemplating the future, Captain? She asked. Wondering if we've really changed, Holt admitted. If humanity has truly learned from our mistakes or if we're just better at justifying our actions now. Miraseth considered his words. The fact that you asked that question suggests you have learned. Tyrants never doubt their righteousness. Only the wise question whether their actions truly serve their stated principles. I hope you're right, Holt said quietly. Because we have incredible power now. Power to protect, yes. But also power to dominate if we chose. The temptation will always be there. Then it's fortunate you're not facing it alone, Miraseth replied. The coalition will be watching, Captain. Not with suspicion but with partnership. We will remind you of your principles when you falter. And you will do the same for us. That's what allies do, they keep each other honest. Holt smiled at that. A galaxy built on mutual accountability. I like that vision. As do I, Miraseth said. Now, Captain, I have a question for you. What will humanity do next? The Dominion is defeated. Will your people settle into the role of guardians? Or is there something else you're planning? Holt looked up at the stars, at the vast expanse of the galaxy that held countless worlds, countless beings, countless stories waiting to be written. We're going to explore, he said. We're going to meet new species, discover new worlds, and learn everything we can about this galaxy we've been away from for so long. But we'll do it differently than we did before. Not as conquerors claiming territory, but as neighbors looking to build relationships. And if we encounter tyranny, oppression, or slavery, we'll stand against it. Every time. Without exception. A noble goal, Miraseth observed. And an endless task. There will always be tyrants, Captain. Always beings who seek to dominate others. Then there will always be someone standing against them, Holt replied firmly. Because that's what we learned during our 400 years away. Freedom isn't something you achieve once and then preserve. It's something you defend constantly with every choice, every action, every generation. The moment you stop defending it, you start losing it. Mirasetha's crystalline features reflected the starlight in complex, beautiful patterns. You know, Captain, when your species first vanished, many thought it was good riddance. Humans were seen as too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous. I was one of those voices calling for the galaxy to simply forget you. And now? Holt asked. Now I think the galaxy is better with humanity in it, Miraseth said honestly. Flawed, yes. Dangerous, certainly. But also capable of incredible compassion, remarkable courage, and genuine growth. You came back better than you left. That gives me hope that all of us can do the same. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, 6 million freed beings were rebuilding their lives, choosing their own paths, living in dignity for the first time in years. Somewhere, Coalition and Terran engineers were working together to develop new technologies. Somewhere, former enemies were learning to see each other as people rather than slaves or oppressors. The galaxy was far from perfect. There would be more challenges, more conflicts, more difficult choices ahead. But for the first time in a long time, the future felt bright. Humanity had returned. Not as the warriors they once were, but as the guardians they had always meant to be. Powerful but compassionate. Strong but merciful. Ready to defend freedom wherever it was threatened. The Terran return was not just the story of one species coming back from isolation. It was the story of a galaxy learning that true strength lay not in domination but in unity. Not in chains but in freedom. And it was only the beginning.